The case story, told on odd days of the month. The fight for life in a cabin on a snowy mountain. This is a true story that happened in Oakley, Utah, USA. As the Tita family headed out to celebrate Christmas at their remote cabin, they were unaware that two cold-blooded gunmen were waiting for them. The beautiful cabin in Oakley, Utah, was located about 4 kilometers off the main road, and had to be reached by snowmobile in the winter. This was where the Tita family often went to find peace. Before the Christmas holiday of 1990, the Tita family decorated the house with a large Christmas tree surrounded by many gifts. On December 22, 1990, 3 days before Christmas, the family finished shopping and returned to the cabin. Lainey Tita, 20, went first with her mother and grandmother, followed by her father and younger sister. It was freezing cold. Lainey ran to open the door, walked up the stairs. She suddenly saw a figure in a gray shirt walking behind the refrigerator, thinking it was her cousins who wanted to tease her. However, behind the refrigerator was a curly-haired man in a gray sweatshirt, holding a pistol pointed at Lainey. She guessed he just wanted to rob and leave. Horrific tragedy. As Lainey's mother, Kay Tita, 49, walked up the stairs, a man in glasses emerged from a back bedroom, pointing a gun at her. Kay asked, "What do you want? Why are you here? I'll give you anything." Just seconds after she said that, gunshots rang out. Lainey saw her mother shot in the chest and her grandmother, Beth Potts, 76, shot in the head, blood splattered everywhere. A few minutes later, Rolf Tita, 51, and Trish Tita, 16, arrived on a snowmobile. The man in a gray sweatshirt grabbed Lainey from behind, one arm around her neck, the other holding a gun to her back. As soon as the father and daughter got off the snowmobile, a man in a ski mask jumped out of the garage, brandishing a gun, and ordered them inside immediately. "Don't move, don't do anything," he said. When asked if he had any money, Rolf reached into his pocket, took out all the money he had, and threw it on the ground. The man in the gray sweatshirt instructed his accomplices to shoot Rolf, but Rolf refused. He then turned the barrel of the gun toward Rolf and pulled the trigger. The gun only went off on the third shot. Then, the two gunmen took the gas cans that were prepared for the snowmobile in the garage, poured them all over the house, and set them on fire to destroy the evidence. They urged the two sisters to quickly load their belongings into the car. Then each girl took one guy on the snowmobile and left the scene. The two sisters saw their uncle named Randy. Randy stopped the car to wave hello, but they turned away, pretending not to know him because they didn't want their uncle to be in danger. When the two gunmen asked, "Who is that?" they replied, "Probably a nice person who lives nearby." The two gunmen took the two sisters to the family's Lincoln parking lot and drove away. At this time, Randy also drove up in his car and waved for them to stop. The two girls continued to pretend not to know him. As Randy noticed something was wrong, another snowmobile sped up. The person riding it was Rolf, wearing no jacket, no gloves, no helmet. Rolf's face was swollen and covered in frozen blood. Rolf reported that the intruders had killed his wife and kidnapped his daughters. Randy drove Rolf down the mountain as fast as he could, gradually catching up behind the Lincoln with 4 people. When his phone got a signal, he called 911 and reported the Lincoln's direction. But at that moment, the phone went dead. Randy drove to a payphone and called 911 again to request a helicopter rescue for Rolf. Meanwhile, noticing the police car following, the two gunmen began to panic. The speedometer read 90 miles per hour. They turned down the canyon, drove a little more than a mile, and then the snowmobile fell off the embankment. Trish looked up to see several police officers pointing their guns at them. The two gunmen were taken out of the car and forced to kneel with their hands behind their necks. Rolf was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and miraculously survived. He said he tried to play dead, was doused with gasoline and set on fire. He ran to the bathroom and ripped off his burning ski suit. Then, with extraordinary determination, Rolf climbed on his sled and raced down the mountain to save his two children, despite losing a lot of blood and having difficulty seeing because his eyes were swollen shut. The ambush of two fugitives. When police arrived at the crime scene, they found pools of blood, bullet holes in the stairwell walls, and bloodstains on the walls. The top floor of the cabin was on fire. Police worked to put out the fire, protect the scene, and protect the victims' property. Blood trails from dragging led police to the bodies of the two victims. After the two women were killed, the two gunmen dragged them across the living room floor to the porch, covering them with blankets and snow. On the coffee table was a VCR and several videotapes. When investigators viewed the videotape inside the camera, they saw the two suspects eating and opening Christmas presents from identified as Vaughn Lester Taylor, 25, and Edward Stephen Delly, 21. Both had served time in the Utah State Prison. Vaughn was convicted of aggravated burglary. Edward was convicted of arson. They were paroled, transferred from prison to a rehabilitation facility, and allowed to go out and find work, but used the opportunity to escape. The duo hitchhiked up the mountain because Vaughn had a relative who owned a cabin in the area. They spent several days in the mountains, breaking into several empty houses to steal things. Authorities theorized that the duo saw the Tita family leave their home and decided to wait for them to return, wanting to get a car to flee the country. They ambushed the Tita family all night. After being arrested, Vaughn and Edward were charged with murder, armed kidnapping, and arson. On May 2, 1991, Vaughn pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder in exchange for the prosecutor dropping the other charges against him. On May 22, 1991, a jury sentenced Vaughn to death for 2 counts of murder, but the sentences have not been carried out to this day. At Edward's subsequent trial, sisters Lainey and Trish testified, calmly recounting the story in detail. However, Lainey also expressed outrage that, although she was the victim, she had to hold one of the murder weapons herself to describe what she had witnessed. Mr. Rolfe surprised Edward when he appeared in court to accuse the murderer, not expecting the victim to survive after being shot in the face. The defense argued that Edward did not fire the gun. But ballistics experts testified that bullets recovered at the scene showed the victims were shot with 2 guns, a .44 caliber pistol and a .38 caliber gun. Witnesses also testified that Edward pointed a .44 caliber gun at the victims before opening fire. The family expected Edward to be convicted of first-degree murder, but the verdict on May 14, 1991, was second-degree murder with a life sentence. A juror refused to find Edward guilty as charged, forcing the jury to convict Edward on a lesser charge to avoid a trial. In 2001, Lainey received a letter from Edward. 9 years later, she responded, wondering if he was truly sorry. Edward shared that he had grown up and was no longer the evil person who had committed those crimes. Lainey chose to forgive him to ease her mind, but forgiveness does not mean forgetting. The burned-down cabin was rebuilt by Mr. Rolfe to be larger and more beautiful, turning it into a place of healing and family bonding.